episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. As per usual, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, liked, commented, all that kind of stuff. Obviously there's a few comments I haven't had the time to catch up with yet, but obviously I'll reply to them as soon as possible. Also, as per usual, any comments I do make on today's episode of the show are wholly my own and have no bearing on the company that I work for. Right, okay, this week's episode of the show. Again, carrying on the theme of the last few weeks, we're looking at some brand new stuff, or well, brand new stuff to me anyway. Basically, a few weeks ago I had a really nice message from a chap called Stevie James, and I quote, I've been watching your whisky reviews for a couple of months now and really enjoy them, which is really nice. Thank you very much for that. I currently work at the Whisky Baron, which is an independent bottling brand, and would love to send you a sample pack and hear your thoughts on our current range. Yeah, okay, cool. As you know, as I know you like a Glenrothes, we would be particularly interested to hear your thoughts on ours. Well, as you can see, a number of quite generous samples turned up in the post about a week or so back now, including the aforementioned Glenrothes, and obviously Stevie was that sure that I would enjoy said bottle. He sent me a full one. I mean, that is just incredibly generous. Either he was sort of like so convinced that I would love it, or he wanted to kill me. One of the two. I don't know. As you can see, a lot of it has kind of disappeared because a certain person not a million miles away from here loves her sherried whiskies, so has been enjoying that. But anyway, so yeah, that was really cool. That was just such a lovely gesture, and I must admit I had heard of the Whisky Baron in passing. I'd seen mentions of it. The company itself was founded, if I scroll through the message here, in 2018 by a chap called Jake Sharp. Now, he apparently worked for another cask broking company, and well, did a bit of a Robin Hood, I suppose. Well, not necessarily. He was kind of a little bit concerned, I believe, about the fact that, well, I won't say said company because I don't know the company, were ripping people off, but thought the pricing policy was probably a little bit unfair. And as we well know, pricing is such a big issue in the whisky industry these days. So he decided to set up his own company. So in 2018 he set up the Whisky Baron to be a broker and obviously an independent bottling company as well as. And the idea was to be, shall we say, more fairer, shall we say, and broker casks and the bottlings that were, shall we say, as Stevie said, in an affordable and fair manner, which is cool. I mean, that's what we want to see. I mean, certainly there have been some comments on social media about some casks that are being offered around at a ridiculously ludicrous price. So that's pretty cool. Now, you're probably wondering, I suppose, what the title picture is all about, and this kind of leads me in quite nicely to that because I stole it off their website, which I'm certain they wouldn't mind. But anyway, if you go onto the website, you can apparently download their app. Now, this is where it all gets quite cool, because apparently, if you then point your phone camera at the label on the bottle, the Baron comes to life. It's augmented reality, which sounds really cool, it has to be said. And obviously the picture that you can see, the title picture, it shows a rather attractive lady doing exactly that. Now, I must admit I've not downloaded the app because my phone comes out of the ark and there's no room on it, and I've got so many apps that are now redundant which I can't remove. I haven't got any room for any more, so I haven't actually tried it out. But it looks really cool. So the Baron kind of comes to life, and this is and tells the tale of the particular bottle, the distillery, some information about that, and the kind of backstory, I suppose, to the concept of the Whisky Baron was to tell the stories of the Whisky Barons. You know, these sort of, you know, larger than life characters from the past that set the foundations of the current whisky industry. So so I liked it. I thought that was really funky. I love it when they try something a bit different, something a bit unique. Certainly I've never heard of anything quite like that before. But of course, as you well know, frippery, fancy apps, all that kind of stuff is a mere irrelevance really at the end of the day. It's the juice in the bottle that counts, and as you can see, I have 6 samples here in front of me, which I shall cast my somewhat critical eye upon. So don't think there's a great deal else left to say apart from let's take a look at the lineup. Right, okay, so we're going to kick off with another one of my favourite distilleries. This is Fettercairn. This is a single bourbon barrel, number 4622. It was distilled in October of 2008, bottled in March of 2019, thus making it 10 years old and bottled at 48%. Bottling number 2 we're going to be looking at is a Glentachers. This is a 6-year-old Glentachers. It's a single sherry hogshead, 9900329, distilled in November of 2014, bottled in December of last year at 62.5. Now, it does seem to be, there are a lot of young Glentachers casks knocking about on the market. This is not the first one that I've come across, and not the first young sherry cask Glentachers. Now, Glentachers seems to stand up to sherry pretty well, and so that could be quite an interesting one. Number 3 is the Glenrothes. So yes, first fill sherry butt, which not a surprise really at the end of the day. Number 6147. This is a 12-year-old, distilled in June of 2006, bottled in March of 2019, and bottled at 57%. Next bottling we'll be looking at is the Bunnahabhain. I would like to say before I carry on that there are obviously, they do 2 ranges here. These first 4 bottlings are coming from what they call their Founders Collection range. So this is a 16-year-old Bunnahabhain, a single bourbon hoggy, 3186, distilled in October of 2002, bottled in March of 2019 at 51%. And then we're going to come on to the other range that they do. This is what they call their Renaissance collection, which obviously they bottle their slightly older and somewhat more expensive bottlings. The first one of those 2 which we're going to look at is this one. This is a 23-year-old Springbank. Fresh sherry butt, number 289, distilled in April of 1997, bottled in June of 2020, bottled at 54.6%. Now this is, I believe, certainly I know that the Whisky Baron have no stock left of it, actually the recommended retail price was 400 quid. Now, I was mentioned sort of earlier on about sort of ludicrous casks, and certainly I was reading about one. I think was a 23 or 28-year-old Springbank being offered by I forget the name of the company now, and they wanted something in the region of £625 per bottle for it. I mean, madness, absolute madness. I mean, if a retailer was going to put that out on the shelf, you're looking at a price at around about 990 odd quid per bottle. I mean, so £400 per bottle, it's an absolute bargain. Anyway, enough of that, otherwise I'll get into trouble if I say too much more about that, no doubt. The last bottling we'll be looking at hasn't actually yet been bottled, and I'm guessing, given what it is and its age, it will be bottled eventually in their Renaissance collection. This is a 1997 Bowmore. It's currently 23 years old, with an approximate cask strength of 48%. It's a refill bourbon hoggy. I don't know the number, but it was distilled in March of 1997, so quite looking forward to that, because as you know, I love my old Bowmores, although sadly I guess they have been disappointing of recent. Admittedly, I've not tasted a huge amount of old Bowmores, but the ones I have come across in the last, I would guess, probably year or so, have been somewhat disappointing considering their price tag. And I would guess that when this is eventually bottled, it will have a price tag of around a similar kind of price to the Springbank, probably more so, because Bowmore does seem to be rather expensive. But anyway, so that's this afternoon's lineup. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So, going to kick off with some Fettercairn. Right, okay, so kicking off with the Fettercairn. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Yeah, well, that's Fettercairn, right? Actually, it's pretty clean by Fettercairn standards. I mean, there's no burning rubber tyres or anything like that. It's really quite clean, quite fresh. It has that classic sort of hard industrial barley. There's a little bit of gooseberry, touch of caster sugar, and a little bit of vanilla. I mean, I'm guessing a fairly refilled bourbon barrel, I would guess, because I'm not getting a huge amount of oak character. So you're getting the full Fettercairn experience here. Although, like I said, it's certainly nowhere near as kind of fire and brimstone-y as some Fettercairns of the past have been. So in actual fact, I mean, yeah, the nose is actually not too bad. I mean, you know, like I said, you can't say that it doesn't have distillery character. It's not exactly a style that I particularly love, but you know, like I said, it certainly showcases the distillery character quite well. Anyway, let's see what the powers are. That is quite an austere finish. It's quite fresh, it's very citric, almost to the point of aceticness, it has to be said. Again, hard barley, again, not a great deal of oak. The thing is with Fettercairn is, I mean, right, you know, it's Fettercairn, you know what you're going to get, and with Fettercairn, as I've often said, it really needs some balancing sweetness, and unfortunately I'm not getting enough sweetness from the oak. I mean, it is really austere, that finish, and you know, it's got that sort of pulped acetic fruit character. I mean, it's classic. I mean, it's absolutely classic Fettercairn. But like I said, this particular bottling, for my own personal taste, I would like a little bit more oak, just to give some kind of counterbalance to the industrial character of the spirit, and that's what I always look for in whiskies from these kind of distilleries. So although not my personal cup of tea, I think I think it's not a bad bottle. Right, okay, so let's move on to the 6-year-old Glentachers. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end. Interesting. It's got a kind of mescal-y kind of pulped fruit smokiness happening. There's some white fruit, there's some barley, yes, there's some sherry, but the thing is with Glentachers, although it's a Speyside distillery, I've often found that it has a more Highland character. Of course, obviously, as we well know, the sort of regional styles are really relatively irrelevant, that's a good one, isn't it, are pretty much irrelevant these days, because, you know, just because it's in Speyside doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be what you would expect from a sort of Speyside whisky. And what is a Speyside whisky these days? There's so many different styles, and each distillery is obviously different. And the thing with Glentachers, I've always found it has this real intense minerality to it, which actually stands up well to sherry, and this is actually a pretty good nose. there's a little bit of, develops a little bit of rubber, a little bit of almost tar. It's that sort of, the sherry character is giving it that slightly sort of tarry dried fruit kind of character. And it's really well balanced. I like this. I think this is really quite impressive. And then when you think it's only 6 years old, it just goes to show how young Glentachers can be bottled at. I mean, obviously, I've come across 4-year-old Glentachers, which was absolutely amazing. But yeah, I really like this. And although it's 62.5%, yes, you can smell a little bit of that alcohol, but it's really well contained. That's quite an impressive nose, it has to be said. Let's see what the palate's like. That's alcoholic. I mean, it's more sherried on the palate, more of the raisinated dried fruit, dried citrus peel, treacle. But that combination of the minerality and the alcohol is totally masking the finish. I mean, it is like, ooh. I mean, that is a real hit, it has to be said. But again, it doesn't feel out of balance. It's pretty much, you know, what you would expect. It's sort of 62.5%, for goodness sake. Let's put a little drop of water with it and see what happens now. Right, it's kind of lessened the sherry. I mean, obviously the sherry on the nose to start off with wasn't in your face. It wasn't sort of overly dominating, and I'm getting more of the pulped white fruit, minerals, barley, that sort of minerality, that freshness of character. It's a little bit of almost kind of chocolate powder now. And like I said, the sherry has really dropped off, and it's just a bit of a background whisper, which is just how I like it. So I'll pass on that. Less alcoholic, obviously, fuller, rounder, still got that minerality. Again, less of the sherry impact. More barley, more white fruit, and the sherry is just giving it that hint of raisinated fruit, a little bit of spice, a little bit of chocolate. Again, the finish is a little on the short side. It's still a little masked. The combination of the sort of the minerality and the alcohol does make it feel a little bit short. But I like that. I mean, I think that's really, really impressive. So, yeah, thumbs up for that one. Right, okay. Glenrothes time. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Heavily sherry influenced, obviously. Wasn't expecting anything other than that. Earthy, straw-like dried fruit. A little bit of sweet clementine, tangerine, but underneath all of that there is some industrial character. There's some, you know, there is some distillery industrial character. There's a little bit of barley, some vinegar, wood spice. So it's balanced. I mean, again, you know, they say that Glenrothes and distilleries of that type create a traditional style of spirit, and it has that characteristic that really needs sherry, really, but it does stand up to it, and you do get, it's not wholly one-dimensional. Now I think the recommended retail price on this is about 100 quid. It's clean, no sulphur at all, no blemishes. It's a good cask. It's a good cask of Glenrothes, because it's not too sherried, it's not too industrial. It's kind of just I hate to say this, just about right, really. I'm getting a little bit of vanilla now as well. So it's got a good complexity to it, you know. The oak is giving it a little bit of oak vanilla. and a little smidge of creaminess. Yeah, see what that's like. Earthy, dark, raisinated fruits, touch of treacle, a little bit of toffee. Quite tannic on the mid palate, but those tannins are kind of quite spicy as well, and the spice really lingers through quite nicely. There's a bit of prune, some woodiness as well. It's not got a green woodiness. I'm not getting a huge amount of distillery character, which is possibly a plus. Although there is a little inkling of it right on the finish, certainly on the aftertaste, you get that little bit of industrial character. I'm going to put a little bit of water with it, although I think the alcohol is pretty well contained, although it kind of boosts those spices on the finish, which is actually really quite appealing. So let's see what the water does to it. Okay, I'm getting more citrus, I'm getting a little bit more spirit character. It's a little bit more industrial. The sherry is mellowed off a little bit of walnut shell, touch more vanilla, slightly burnt raisinated fruit. Yeah, I mean that's pleasant. I mean, I'm happy with that. I mean, it's not a sort of, it's not an unpleasant Glenrothes, shall we say. I didn't think I could hear Stevie going, yes! So that's right. Softer, juicier. Again, raisinated fruits, a little bit of prune. Dried plum, plenty of citrus character. Again, it's got a lovely lift to it. A little bit of chocolate, a little bit of spirit character. Again, those spices are still there, and it really does finish quite spicy. It's got a almost tongue-tingling spiciness right on the finish. Yeah, I like that. I think it's chewy. It's a pleasant sherry. I wouldn't quite go as far as saying it's a sherry monster, because you know I am getting some of the distillery character. So in that essence, it's actually pretty well balanced as far as I can see. So yeah, quite like that. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Booner. So Bourbon Hoggy Booner. Let's see what those gives us on this end, shall we? Well, that's an unusual Booner. I mean, Booner is certainly an American oak, is quite delightful, summery, aromatic. I'm afraid this isn't anywhere near any of those descriptors. It's kind of funky, vegetal, smoked meat, green peppercorn, and industrial barley. This is not Bunnahabhain as I would expect it. It's a touch cabbagey as well, you know. I think we're getting a bit of sort of a little bit of a sulphury kind of character, not a sort of struck match sulphur. I think it's more dimethyl sulphur, I think. That sort of green cabbagey kind of note, and I think there's a little bit of barley. There's something underneath all of that, and it just kind of leaves me thinking that this really should have been left in the cask a little longer. And this is an abject lesson, I suppose, in bottling a whiskey when it's ready, rather than going, well, it's 10, it's 15, it's 20 years old, we think we ought to bottle it now. You stick your nose in the glass and you go, well, yeah, okay, this is 16, but it doesn't smell like that. It just smells so young still, and it really needed more time, or maybe a slightly more active cask to kind of get rid of the sulphur. I don't know whether I mean, yeah, you could have probably put it into decanted it into a first fill American oak cask, and maybe just mask that sulphuriness with a little bit more oak vanilla. But I'm really not loving this. This is not, you know, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I think this is just something, you know, that I would have done if I'd have smelt this. I'd have gone, yeah, shove it into something else, finish it in sherry or something, you know, or port or anything, you know. But it's really not standing on its own 2 feet. Anyway, let's see what the palate's like. Funky, astringent. I'm not getting so much of the cabbagey note, which is thankful. There's a little bit more barley. There's a little bit of green apple. But again, it's short. It's kind of hard. It's industrial. It's not Bunnahabhain. It's not what I would expect from a cask with Bunnahabhain. And you know, it kind of, these sort of bottlings do lend an element of credence to the reason why distilleries kind of sell off certain casks, because they are not falling into their parameters of style. And this certainly is. If I hadn't known this was Bunnahabhain, I really would have been I'd have been somewhere else completely. And yeah, I think this would have benefited from being finished in another cask of some form or description, because really it hasn't got an awful lot going for it, I'm afraid to say. Right, okay, so moving on to the 23-year-old Springbank single fresh sherry butt. Let's see when those goes on this end, shall we? Oh, whoa, huge, gritty Oloroso raisinated fruit. It's got that slight cognac-esque aged rancio, dusty peat, tar, creosote. It's got an animaliness to it. It's raw, but not in an unpleasant sense. I wouldn't have put this as 23. It's kind of almost in a sort of stasis. The cask is so dominant. Yeah, all right. I'm getting that slight, like I said, that slight cognac-y maturity, which would sort of lead me to believe that this is probably in its 20s. But you know, it's rubbery, it's tarry, it's stinky. It's the sort of thing that some of those Springbank aficionados would be wetting themselves over. But to me, it's a sherry monster. Yeah, all right. I'm getting a little bit of well, no, I'm not actually getting any Campbelltown salts. I'm not really getting. Yeah, okay, mate. It would possibly lead me to sort of Springbank, but you know, it's an unmitigated, old, but not very mature, expensive sherry monster. Really, at the end of the day. Let's see what the buzz like. Right, it does show some more maturity on the palate, but it's a big deluge of astringent, dark, dried fruits, quite herbal, intense, quite salty now, touch of dark chocolate, treacle, touch of spice. There's a slight greenness there. It's not sulphur, it's a kind of green wood kind of note. It's a real tannic finish, it has to be said. It's kind of like sucking the moisture out of my mouth, it has to be said. Those tannins are really dry. It's intense, and it's possibly, I wouldn't say been spent too much time in the oak, but it really is very, very oak centric. Yeah, like I say, I think there's a lot of Springbank aficionados would be kind of wetting themselves over this, but to me, it's far too sherried. There's not enough Springbank character. But yeah, it is what it is at the end of the day, and you know, I've come across no end. You know, this is no detriment to this particular cask. I've come across no end of Springbanks that are very much like this and that. Well, just go and watch the the last episode of the show. You know, there was the 8-year-old Springbank. I mean, that was just a horrendous sherry monster. At least this has got a little bit more maturity going for it. But yeah, it's really not kind of lighting my fire, as they say. Right, finally we're on to the Bowmore. This is well, currently 23, and I would imagine it's probably going to be, well, I don't know, I'll stick my nose in the glass and see whether I think it's going to be bottled this year or not. Anyway. Oh my God, that's stunning. It's been a long time since I've come across an old Bowmore this good. It's old school. It's kind of dusty American oak, shellfish, a little bit of sweet peat smoke, barley, white fruit, salt, citrus. Has got that lemony note which I often find with Springbank. Oh my God, that is just elegant. It's delicate. This is arguably the best old Bowmore I have come across in a long time. And bottle it, please, please, please bottle it. It is so ready for bottling. A little bit of seaweed, some barley. I mean, stunning. I cannot overstate how stunning this nose is. It is incredibly good. It's the sort of nose you just want to keep smelling over and over and over again. But obviously, if I did that, this episode of the show would go on forever and a day. Anyway, so I'm going to taste it. Subtle, delicate, elegant, old school Bowmore. It's got that echo of dusty coal scuttle peat, mature barley, apricot, apple, a little bit of salt. Oh, that's stunning. That's beautifully balanced. A little bit of dusty American oak. Lovely kind of the finish. The finish is just gorgeous. It's fruity. It's salty. It's mature. Touch of soy sauce, a bit of umami, I think is the word. Dusty spice. I mean, this really harks back to me, the golden age of Springbank. I mean, not Springbank, golden age of Bowmore. I remember 20 odd years ago, well, 10, 15, 20 odd years ago, there was a lot of this old Bowmore on the market. And you know, it was stunning, and even the Bowmore range from back then was just absolutely stunning. And then suddenly it all changed somewhere down the line. There was a lot more kind of oak character. There was a lot more. I just remember the old 12 and the old 15-year-old Bowmore. It was a hairy beastie. It was, you know, windswept. It was salty. It was lemony. It was peaty. And then somewhere along the lines, a lot more oak kind of crept in and became more polished and a bit more kind of safe and a bit more, you know. And this really harks back, in my personal opinion, to the great days of Bowmore. I mean, you know, they probably still. I haven't tasted Bowmore in absolute ages, not distillery Bowmore anyway. So maybe I'm doing a bit of a disservice, but certainly I remember the 18, the current 18, is a bit kind of like. you know, and the price tag is pretty damn steep as well, you know, and for over 100 odd quid is just like, you know, not really good enough in my personal opinion. Now this, on the other hand, is stunning, you know, and it's probably going to be a fair few pennies, but if you love your old school Bowmore, then stick your hand in your pocket when this comes out. Right, okay, so let's on today's episode of the show. Firstly, a real big thank you to Stevie for sending me the samples, generous samples as well. Lovely to get nice generous samples so I can taste them beforehand and then still have, you know, a nice amount left for an episode of the show. And, you know, I think overall there's been some high points, there's been some low points. Certainly the Fettercairn is not my kind of cup of tea, I will say that, but plenty of distillery character, can't fault it. It is what it is, as I say at the end of the day. The Glentachers, I really like that. I thought for a sherry monster, well, not sherry monster, but for a sherry matured Glentachers of a young age, really good, and just goes to show how intense the character of Glentachers' spirit actually is, and how it can withstand, you know, a good bashing by sherry. The Glenrothes, I mean, I have to say that was not a bad bottling of Glenrothes. You know, and I keep saying this over and over again, I'm not anti-sherry, but I'm not a fan of one-dimensional sherry monsters, is the same as I'm not a fan of one-dimensional American oak monsters. So for me, that was actually not a bad bottling of Glenrothes. And how many times are you going to hear me saying that? Probably not that many. The Bunnahabhain, yeah, well, we're going to pass on that one. That was not a high point whatsoever, not a great cask. And like I said, probably something else should have been done with that. Stick it into an export pipe or a you know, wine cask, or just do something, because that was not great. At the Springbank, well, yeah, like I said, I mean, it's kind of, to me, not my favourite style. Again, heavy sherry, but I can see why that's completely sold out, because, you know, there's so many Springbank aficionados that wet themselves over that kind of stuff. And without a shadow of a doubt, the highlight of this afternoon was certainly the Bowmore. Stunning, absolutely stunning. I mean, you know, blew me away. Old school Bowmore. It's just been so long since I've tasted an old Bowmore of that kind of quality. And like I said, bottle that, please. Yeah, I'd be happy bunny with that. It has to be said. So yeah, there you go. That's this week's episode of the show. Next week I have got yet more new stuff. My God, I'm spoiling you lot. And all I can say is that next week is going to be every week. All the episodes of the show are really intriguing, but all I can say is that next week is going to be really intriguing. So until then, I'm going to love the last drop of this old school Bowmore. Good running and good afternoon.